things sure have changed a lot. My dad eventually started buying materials amongst other locations from RZ. Of course, RZ was sold to Allied, and Allied was sold to Beacon. But for the people in the know, RZ back in the 70s, my dad bought a lot of material from them. And back then, when you bought enough material, they would send you on free vacations. I remember my dad went to Brazil with his girlfriend, free vacations, and you would get sometimes free dinners in the real fancy locations with ice sculptures and whatnot. Nowadays, you don't get pretty much shit. No offense to you people working at Beacon today, but things are quite different. But my dad did really well with the roofing, and I remember our first house we bought was on 4 Brookdale Road in East Brunswick, and I still remember when I was probably 3, 4, 5 years old, thereabouts, my mom and dad arguing because the house, I'm trying to remember, was something like $9,000 in that area, and they were going to have a mortgage for something like $200 a month. And my dad wanted to do it, but my mom said, no, how can you afford $200 a month where something goes wrong? Ultimately, they did it, and they sold the house 4 or 5 years later and made about $10,000 profit on it. Bought their second house on 167 Dunham's Corner Road in East Brunswick, and they bought that house for $25,000. And then my mom and dad split up a number of years later, around 1975. My dad left the house to my mom. My mom sold the house for around $75,000, made a $50,000 profit, but lost all that money gambling in Atlantic City. But she had a really good time gambling. Anyhow, my dad left that house, and that was the early years of that. During that time, while we had the house on Dunham's Corner Road, when I got to be about 16, I bought my third car, of course, old used junkers, not great cars. My first car was a 64 Dodge Dart. Can't remember the second car. But the third car was a really cool black Chevy SS. Chevy something SS, I can't remember, Impala SS. And it had a shifter on the floor, 3 or 4 speed shifter, and the car looked really cool. And I got it for something like $1,500, I don't remember. So of course I looked at the back seat, front seat, under the hood, under the car, all around the car. I don't know why it's $1,500, but I bought it. Got the car home. About an hour later, hey, I'm looking at the trunk, see what the spare, there's a spare in there, and then I found out why the car was $1,500. I looked in the trunk when they opened it, and they had a strap. Actually, I'm sorry, I had 2x4 inside the car. There's big holes in the back, and they had ropes on the 2x4s holding the gas tank up. Not a good idea. Drove the car for a couple days. How to get rid of that car? Somewhere around the early 1980s, of course, I'm roofing now my own, not really busy yet, and we did a job on rare occasion for other contractors in order to fill in my work and keep busy. There was a guy called Stanley Roofing. He was out of South River on Main Street, and he was a pretty big contractor. At that time, I was a nobody, and he was a big, well-known contractor. He had his office in South River. And back then, he was specialized in that imitation brick made of a product similar to roofing. It was an asphalt product, looked like brick. And that was very popular back then. He did a lot of that. If you go through South River, you'll still see quite a bit of it to this day. 50 years later, it held up pretty well. And Stanley, of course, did roofing. He himself did nothing. He just sold. And he had a number of guys working for him. I did a couple of jobs for him. So Stanley was an interesting guy. He had a really nice convertible Cadillac. I don't remember if it was a convertible or not, but it was a Cadillac. Big-ass car. The kind of a trunk that if you're a mafia guy, you could fit 6 bodies in it without folding them over. It was a pretty cool trunk. So one day, Stanley comes to the job to check on us, and he had this kind of a voice. Hey, John, how you and the guys doing? It's pretty hot out today. Yeah, Stanley, it's really hot. You boys are doing a good job. What if I get you boys a soda? That'd be great, Stanley. So Stanley leaves, comes back a half hour. He blows a horn downstairs. It's big-ass Cadillac. Hey, boys, come on down. So we're sweating our ass off. We go walking downstairs, down the ladder, blah, blah, blah. We get to the back of Stanley's car. He opens the trunk, and inside, there's nothing in the trunk, not even a spare tire. These 2 little cans of soda, just rolling around as he drove to us in the back of his trunk. We go pick them up, figuring they'd be cold. We put them to our forehead. They're lukewarm. We look at them. They weren't Coca-Cola. They weren't Pepsi-Cola. They weren't Mountain Dew. They weren't 7-Up. They were ShopRite brand. Cheap bastard buys us warm ShopRite brand sodas that are rolling around in the back of the truck. Thanks, Stanley. Appreciate that. But he was a nice guy. But I'll just say he didn't spend a lot of money. So years went by. I did just 3 or 4 jobs for him over the years. And one day he's a lot older, very, very wealthy. And I got to know him a little better. I said, Stanley, why are you still working? I don't remember his age. Let's say he was in his 70s, thereabouts. He had a real nice car, plenty of money. He didn't need to work anymore. So I said, Stanley, why are you still working? You got plenty of money, retire. He said, John, if I tell you something, you can't tell nobody else. Well, I'm going to tell now. This is probably like 35 years later. Stanley's gone, the wife's gone. Nobody's going to know. So what Stanley says to me, John, the reason I'm still working is I got a wife. I need a reason to get out of the damn house every day. And that was Stanley Roofing.